Election. I applaud them and I thank them for their candidacy and for their past and future services. Secondly, I'd like to thank those who've put this together, the Maynard Selectmen for the use of the hall, Mark Manasian for WAVM, Marin Kalissa of Revitalize Maynard Collaborative, and Sarah Cressy of the Athabasca Valley Chamber and her crew. I'd like to take a minute to go over the rules this evening. First, the two candidates for the Contested Stool Committee race will have drawn numbers, or actually flip the coin, so that we can establish the speaking order. Each candidate for all the positions will be given a 1 minute opening statement, even for the uncontested races, so they can give out their views. There will be a question period on the contested race. Each candidate will get a 2 minute opening statement, 2 minutes to answer the questions, and then they'll have a closing statement. Audience questions are encouraged. You should have a 3x5 card and a pen in every seat. So Jack here will collect those, and he will consolidate duplicate questions and take out all the swear words and various other things. Let's see. I will start off using a question from our list of questions that we gave to the candidates earlier until the questions come in through to us, and then we'll give preference to the audience questions. It is my intention to move the meeting along quickly so everyone gets a chance to speak and so that we maximize the number of questions. I'm going to be kind of tough on the warnings. So the timekeepers at the center row here have a 30-second white warning sign, and then they have a 10-second before the end of an orange warning sign, and then they have a red stop sign. In order to be fair as possible, I will strictly enforce the limits. If you run over, you get a 5-second grace period, at which point I'll just cut you off. Anything that you feel that you need to say that was left unsaid, you can do as part of the closing statement. So the meeting sequence, I'm going to open with Terrence Donovan. Is he here? Okay. I'll have you come up, and then Patty Chambers next. Beth here.
That's Lynn.
Oh, okay. And then you'll be next, and then Dawn, you'll get to come up with your opening statements, and then we'll move to the two candidates for the contested race. Let's see. There's a sign-in sheet for anybody who wants to give their name, so we'll give that to the candidates later so that they have a chance to contact you and maybe lobby a little bit for the vote. Also, there's literature on the table there, so if you want to pick up something from the candidates, please feel free over there. So let's get started. So will Mr. Donovan come up and give your opening statement?
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody tonight.
Dick, we told them that they have 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so you get 2 minutes.
We'll take 2 minutes then. So I am Terrence Donovan. I'm very humbled to be up here in front of everybody. I am running as for the Board of Selectmen for Maynard, and I do appreciate that everyone here obviously is very invested in the town, and you're looking to see what the candidates are all about. I am running in a pseudo-uncontested race, but I do still need votes in order to be in this seat here, in July. I'm fully approachable in this town. I've been here 17 years. My wife Diane and I have chosen Maynard as a home, where we raise 2 children here. We're taxpayers like everybody else. We work in the workforce. I'm a small business partner as well. I'm a U.S. Navy veteran. I'm a former coach in the town. I sit on the board of assessors right now, so I feel strongly about civic duty. I really, really enjoyed my time in Maynard here for the last 17 years, and all I can really say is, without sharing too much information about a pseudo-platform about what we're talking about, I just am very honored and humbled, and I'm committed to doing everything I can here in Maynard to help push us continuously forward for 2015 and into beyond. I've talked to many people over the last few months who've encouraged me to run. And again, I think it's a tremendous town that has a lot of passion about where we can go and where we've been. And I look forward to really being in front and helping people communicate, collaborate, and be accountable for the decisions we all make here, and be as transparent as possible within reason to share the information with you so we can all make informed decisions. So with that, I will say thank you very much for coming, and I appreciate the time tonight and the invite, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rogers. I'd like Patty Chambers.
Thanks, Dick.
Yeah.
Good evening. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Patty Chambers. I've lived here in Maynard all my life. I moved here when I was two. I'm running for re-election for library trustee. I've been on the board since July 2009. Prior to that, I served on the finance committee from September 97 to 2003. And I also served on the town administrative search committee back when the charter was first established, and then a town facilities committee. So I've worked a lot as a volunteer here in town. I serve on other boards. I've been a past board member of the Assabet Valley Chamber of Commerce. I am going in as co-chairman of Open Table of Concord and Maynard this June, and I'm an incorporator for Emerson Hospital. I serve as the liaison to the Friends of the Maynard Library. So I'm visible in town. I work here in town. I work at Middlesex Savings Bank. I'm a vice president and regional branch manager there, so many familiar faces. And I'm always open for any comments, concerns about the library, about anything else that's going on in town. Thank you.
Beth Houlihan?
Hello, my name is Bethlyn Houlihan, and I see a lot of familiar faces just in this room, which is one of the things I love about Maynard, is just a true feeling of community and being with people, and just the vibrancy that goes with being able to walk downtown and see so many great people. I'm running uncontested for a 3-year seat for school committee. But I've been nonetheless trying to really get the word out about what I'm standing for and what I'm hoping to be able to do as a part of that. I've been talking to a lot of people as well, as many of us have, and I understand that it's there are limitations to everyone's role, and at the same time, I believe very strongly in being able to create an atmosphere of learning that really harnesses the innate curiosity and joy that can be a part of the exploration of learning at every age. And so I want to make sure that that is not forgotten as we are looking at really this focus that we have at this point of having to teach towards the test. As I talk to teachers and hear what they say, they feel like their hands are tied and they're doing so much more than they ever did to try to document, and that they have to be able to meet certain requirements within the classroom that really keeps them from being able to themselves, I think, feel like they're passing along the joy of learning. So that is the bottom line. That's the main thing I'm focused on, is seeing how we can, at this point, we're at a crossroads to create lifelong learners and to help at every age in the school system to make that possible and to support the teachers in doing that. And I think that that is something we can address on the policy level. And that's what I would like to be able to be a part of on school committee, as well as engaging with the community and getting feedback and really hearing where people are coming from and trying to find ways to just bring it together and help us to move forward and just celebrate this great town.
Thank you. And Dawn Capello.
So thanks everyone for coming. This is great to see a wonderful turnout. Thanks Sarah and Revitalize Maynard for putting this together. I've been in Maynard probably about 12 years now. My wife and I have a 5.5-year-old son who is in Green Meadow in the Spanish immersion program, and it's really amazing to be part of that school part of the community. As some of you know, I've served on planning board, board of selectmen, and now as a member of the school committee, I'm really able to harness a lot of what I've learned along the way and a lot of things I've heard along the way to work closely now with the school administration and the business manager. My passion tends to be towards the budget and the business side of things, because people like Bethlyn and educators and former educators, they know a lot more about education. I want to make sure we can afford to do it and do it the right way. So what's great is we have a good school committee now. We have a few people retiring who've done so much for the community, and I think we have such a great pool of candidates we're going to have a lot of different passions, and I feel like Maynard is already well on its way to having a better school system, a better reputation. Things are great in Maynard schools. I think all we lack is a positive vibe, something that Maynard Town has had sometimes. So it's great to just be a part of a positive group. I'm excited, and I am running uncontested, but I don't take anything for granted. You never know when there'll be a crazy write-in campaign, so I would appreciate everyone's support. I'm excited to give it another go for 3 years. I'm currently the joint appointee from the Board of Selectmen and the school committee to fill in an interim term. So I'm excited to run again and give it a go. So thank you.
All right, so we'll move on now to opening statements with our contested race. And due to the flip of the coin, Mr. Costello is going to go first.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out tonight. My name's Dan Costello. Thanks to the folks who put this together. I will admit I'm very happy but exceedingly nervous about the turnout. I really expected a couple of hardy souls to join us, but here we are with a packed house. So thank you very much for coming out. I started out my career as a history teacher, and I used to talk about democracy a lot and told students that democracy is a responsibility. So here I am trying to take my responsibility and serve the community. And unlike most people in the room, I'm a newbie. I've been in town for a year. I lived in Maynard and raised my 3 girls. Lived in Worcester, raised my 3 girls, but recently got married to a Maynard mom and moved here. And I've been happy not only because I met Carrie, which has been the best part, but coming to this community where there is a great spirit, where there is a real sense of community and pride in the town and the schools. And so I'm really happy to be a part of that. I've been a career educator, currently working for a company called Amplify. I'm also a part-time Little League coach for 8-year-old girls, and that's a lot of fun too. We had our first game yesterday over in Coolidge Field. I want to work hard for the schools. I know Mary's going to do the same. I think the town's in a good spot in having candidates who want to do this work and who are qualified and talented. So I applaud Mary as well, and I look forward to some really good interaction tonight. I'm sure there will be some tough questions, but I know Mary is ready to answer them. Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. Mark.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Thanks. I'm Mary Marich. I have lived in Maynard for 7 years this summer, and I've put a lot of stuff out there in terms of what I believe when it comes to education, but I was thinking just to kind of hit the point home of how much this means to me, just the field of education generally. I wanted to bring this, and this is an old ditto copy of a speech by New York City's Teacher of the Year back in 1991. His name was John Gatto, and I have it still from high school. I mean, it's covered with coffee stains and has my high school notes, but it's the first thing that I read that made me seriously think about teaching. And it was, unfortunately, not about what's best in education, but it was about all those things that are wrong. And when I began my career teaching in a very good public school, I still felt frustrated at things that I felt powerless to change as a teacher. So while I think the school that I taught at was very good, they were serving the students in the highest level classes much more effectively than students in the lowest level classes. And I had colleagues who would say things like, "Oh, I can't believe you have to teach the kids in those classes who are in that lower level." And it used to break my heart thinking about it, because the kids in that lower level class were wonderful kids who just felt like they were failing and had been told that they were failing for a long time. And I just used to think, if somebody told me, "You're bad at swimming, but you have to come every day of your life for the next 13 years, I would start to hate it too. So feeling frustrated there, I ended up leaving teaching for a while, went back to graduate school, thought I could make a difference there, and I think realized how hard that is to do on any grand scale. So I've tried a number of routes. The one thing I haven't tried is politics. And I think Maynard's in a great place. I know that our schools used to be losing students to surrounding towns, but over the past years, between 2009 and 2014, enrollment has increased by 7%. And people aren't leaving the district quite as much anymore. And I think that's a great sign, but I think we have a little more to do. Thanks.
So Jack is preparing questions from the audience, and so we'll just start off with a question here, and then we'll move over to Jack's, the audience's questions. So first, as one of 5 members and only at 20% of the vote, how do you feel that you can best influence decisions on the board?
And I'm first, right? I think that, just personality-wise, I self-identify as an introvert, and so to be here, public speaking, this is one of my greatest fears that I try to face every once in a while. But I think that what I envision my personal role as being is to ask some hard questions. And so, one of the biggest powers I think a school committee member has is in looking at the budget. I mean, it's policy, but it's also budget. It's what are we willing to fund? And I think I'm willing to ask hard questions about, okay, if we say we value this, then why are we funding that? If we say we value that, why are we funding this? And just being able to point those things out. I'm a good team player, and I feel like one of my greatest strengths is probably listening to other people, even people that I might disagree with. So yeah, that's my short answer.
Okay, same question.
Yeah, I think it's really important to listen to what the board members have to say, to really give it some serious thought. I mean, I'm experienced. I've got over 20 years in public education, but I don't think I know everything. And I think people who bring passion to their beliefs deserve to be listened to so we can move towards consensus. And I think you got to pick your spots too. I think there might be something I feel really strongly about that I want to try to speak a little bit more to, and that's fine. But on other issues, we got to let everybody's voice be heard and come to an agreement about it.
Okay. Thank you. First audience question, direct to Mr. Costello. Do you think that the quality of learning is more important than the quantity? Well, I have a tough time reading this. Of the education, in other words, shouldn't the emphasis be on nurturing children interested in robotics more important than cranking out the robots themselves?
Yeah, I don't think our kids are robots. But, I think I don't always accept the premise that these things are mutually exclusive. Like we're either going to test the kids or we're going to nurture in a level of learning. I mean, I've been in plenty of schools where both things take place. I've been in schools where neither takes place, believe me. I think we can do both, but I think it is possible to take a scientific approach to what we do. Teaching is a profession. I think, sometimes the argument is about the art and the science of teaching, but it's a profession, and a profession has standards, profession has expectations. We have to really hold teachers accountable for being professionals, and we need to ensure that learning is going on, and we need to know how the learning is going on. It doesn't always mean a standardized test, but we need to know at the end of the day how our students are doing, and we have to be able to measure that. But there's lots of different ways to do it. I'm a proponent of balanced assessment, which means there's different ways to measure. Some of them are quantitative. There are very many qualitative measures as well.
Since we've come to the subject of testing, I agree with Dan that I believe there do need to be different types of assessment in place, but I do think as the American educational system is just become too obsessed with things that are quantifiable and easily quantifiable, and it's very hard to measure, especially for an outsider, to measure the love that a teacher can foster within an individual student. And I would argue that that is most important, but again, since it is a profession, it raises the question of how do you measure that? And I think it's time consuming. I think it requires principals to be visiting classes on a somewhat regular basis, not in an intimidating way, but just to know what's going on, within the school system and know who's working for you. I raised a question a couple years ago to the head of my school because I just feel like as a culture we've become so obsessed with success and with achievement. And I just raised the question of, what matters more, the colleges that our kids are getting into when they graduate or the kind of people that we're graduating? And I would argue, in my opinion, it's the latter. And I think there are times where those conflict. And so if we're dedicating, X number of days to the PARCC test or, to documenting Common Core standards, with our curriculum maps, I just think we waste a lot of resources because Maynard's lucky. It's a small system. And we really have the potential to maximize the relationships between teachers and students.
Okay, thank you. You're up again. So, if the school committee has no parents of children at any level of school other than young levels, how do we assure that the concerns of higher level children are heard?
I think that's an awesome question, and I know from talking to people who have been on school committee and who are running that that's a concern that we share as well. And so I think it's important to find forums and find ways to putting ourselves out there, making ourselves accessible so that we hear the concerns of other parents. At Taste of Maynard, when I was walking around trying to get my signatures to get added to the ballot, I was privy to hearing some of those, and it was great because I don't know a lot about what's going on, especially in terms of curriculum at Fowler and at the high school level. So hearing from a mom who's concerned about robotics, because I believe the robotics, they still have it as a program but not a class, and she was frustrated about that. So I think it's listening, putting yourself out there, trying to bring, I know it's tough for people to make meetings, but trying to really encourage more people to come to school committee meetings and to voice those concerns, because we certainly want to listen and want to hear them. Our kids are headed there, so we definitely care about the entire system, not just Green Meadow.
I think school committee members can become familiar with the different levels of education. There's 3 buildings. I think, I see school committee members at schools, and I think that's an important role to play so we can understand what's going on and understand the challenges that take place at each of the 3 levels. I think the candidates here and most parents I know have an ability to understand, to be empathetic to what's going on at the different levels. I've been fortunate to have experience at all the levels. I was a high school principal. I was a middle school principal. I'm the proud dad and stepdad of 4 girls who are at different stages in their educational careers. So I don't see that as a big challenge, but certainly it takes effort to make sure that we're in tune with what's going on in all 3 buildings.
Okay, so we'll start with you again. And if you ever need me to repeat a question, I'd be happy to do that. If you could only change one thing during your time on the school committee, what would it be?
The website. I really want our presence on the web in social media to be expanded, and I really want the community members to have access to information that they need, and they need it in a timely way, they need it in a thorough way, they need it in a transparent way, and I certainly make that one of my top priorities to make sure that all of our budget information is readily available, and whatever other information that people need, but I don't think it's quite there yet.
The website could use a facelift, but I'd say for me it would be trying to increase the emphasis on cultural competency and on teaching students to communicate across difference. I would want to go in, because I don't know a lot, again, right now about the curriculum, especially in the upper schools. I would want to know, are things in place to teach cultural competency. I look at what's going on right now in Baltimore, and it concerns me deeply. And I think we're at this really tough moment as a country where if we can't learn to talk to people that we might not understand, if we can't try to reach across those boundaries and try to understand them, then we're really in trouble. So that would be one. And if I can add on to that, I think you can teach cultural competency through experiential learning and interdisciplinary learning. So I think that's the curricular piece, but my goal would be cultural competency.
Okay, and again, you can start off with the next question. Well, actually, 2 questions. One, do you support transparency in the budget for the schools? And if so, in what ways do you think that the school could be more transparent with their budgets?
It's a great question. I have a copy of the proposed budget for next year right here, and it's some of it makes sense, but there are questions that I have. In certain categories where they list salaries, you don't know if it's for 1 teacher, 3 teachers. I have questions about the electrical bill at the high school, and why is that so much higher than the electrical bill at Fowler? I think the more transparent we can be with all the members of the community, the better, because then people can ask questions. Because if you're given something that still looks like foreign language to you and you're trying to read it and you can't make sense of it, it's very hard to go to a school committee meeting and advocate. So I know most school districts, I'm not sure if Maynard does, as far as I can tell, I haven't been able to find the answer to this, but most public districts post individual teacher salaries with a name attached. And do we necessarily have to have the name attached? Maybe not, but maybe subject area and what they teach and how many teachers. So then when we're looking at something on here where it says, $200,000 in salaries to the teachers for art, I'm like, well, how many people is that? It'd just be helpful to know that kind of thing. So we definitely could be better at communicating the budget.
Yeah, I'm trying to separate some space between my opponent, but we're on the same page on this, so strike one. No, we can do a lot more. I looked at the budget as well and had some of the same questions. Just for one example is there should be subtotals along the way, because the $16 million is the only total that shows up on that budget. There should be building by building. There should be, utilities, salaries. Salaries seem to include, in my opinion, all of the benefits that go along. So it's a total compensation package, but that can be broken down as well. Again, all this is about transparency and making the details clear to anybody who wants to know. I'm not really hot to trot to post individual salaries, but I understand why some communities do that. But I think if we can have a really clear picture with subtotals, there's no reason we shouldn't have some bar graphs and charts along with this, so that it makes it really easy to understand where the money's going, because the community spends a lot of money on the schools, and I think we owe that to have a really clear picture.
Okay. Next question for you, Mr. Costello. What do you think the Maynard Public Schools can do to overcome the negative reputation that some people still have about our school system?
Well, I will exercise my unique perspective as an outsider to say that I don't think it's as bad as people seem to think it is, because I know a lot of good things about Maynard from being outside of this community. But I think it's fair to say that we always want to have the best schools we can have. But a reputation is easy to make and it's hard to undo, right? I mean, that one story, that one fight, that one whatever, that tale can linger for a long time. But again, I think if we really are committed to increasing transparency, if we're really committed to getting the word out, then people are going to find out all the good things that are going on in the schools. That we can share that message regularly and with enthusiasm and excitement, because again, whoever wins this election, there's going to be a really passionate advocate for public education in town. So I think that's going to be a part of the solution, is that we're out there communicating the successes and all the good things that are going on with our kids.
To go back to something Dan said earlier, I think the website could help with that, just in terms of a public perception, revamping the website. I think Bob Girardi having his blog and just trying to celebrate some of the things that are going on in the schools has helped a little bit. But I really think the most important people to sell the school system are the parents of the children who are in it. And I hear a lot of good things from those parents for the most part. There are some concerns for sure, as I think there would be anywhere. But programs like our Spanish immersion program are attracting people from other towns. So there are people, in Acton, Concord, who want to try to get their kids into our system. And so I think that perception's already started to shift, and we're losing fewer kids to other districts than we used to. And I just think we got to keep that momentum going. We got to get people involved, get people singing Maynard's praises. And in my short time, my 7 years here, I've heard a lot of that, and that's one of the reasons I've fallen in love with Maynard. There's so many activities, causes that are supported by the people of Maynard, that are initiated by them. The co-op right now, the Litter League. They're just really great town-organized events. So I don't think we'll have any problem with that going forward.
Okay. And the next question is for you. What is your educational background?
My educational background is complicated. Well, I just went all over the place, but I grew up in New Hampshire, so I don't know how far back I should go, but I attended Catholic school, public school, and then went to Georgetown University for college, spent my junior year abroad in England, did my master's in English education at Wake Forest, then started teaching, and then decided I wanted to change the world some more, and I didn't think I could do it where I was. So I went back to grad school to pursue a PhD that was in English and education, and I wrote 3 chapters out of 5 for my dissertation, and missed teaching desperately, and just felt like, why was I doing this? I'd gained what I was going to gain from the coursework, but I ended up deciding to go back to teaching.
Yeah, public school guy, went to UMass, got a degree in history, started teaching, I was a history teacher, and then went and got my master's degree at Salem State. I was very, very fortunate to be in a program that met on weekends and in the summer, so over the course of 2 years I was able to get my master's in education, got my certification as a principal, started principal in the Catholic system, in Worcester at Holy Name High School, and then I became the principal of St. Bernard's High School in Fitchburg. Then was the middle school principal in Gardner, middle school principal in Shrewsbury, and then wound up as high school principal down in a little town called Killingly, Connecticut. So that's my education background. And sophomore year was the best 3 years of my life. So. Oh, sorry.
Question for you again.
And I'm a wicked extrovert, just so I should say. I don't know if that's obvious. One difference between us so far.
That's true.
With the population approaching 500 within a year or so at the high school, without an increase in staff, what do you think are the appropriate class sizes?
I'm going to phone a friend. No, that's a really tough question, but there's a lot more flexibility at high school in scheduling. Class size can vary quite a bit because there are different levels, and there's honors, and there's advanced placement. I think class size tends to be more standardized across elementary and middle school, so a variety of offerings, foreign language, art, all those other things are going to impact it. But, I would think 25 would be a cap that I would support. But I would also believe that, there could be occasions where you go above that. And I'll be perfectly honest, there's a lot of people who prefer smaller class size in the advanced classes. I'd be an advocate for a smaller class size in more remedial classes, because I think kids who are struggling deserve more attention, and kids who are at the higher end are going to be just fine with a solid teacher in front of them.
I agree with smaller class sizes for remedial classes, because I definitely think that then students require more attention, more individual attention. A lot of research suggests that if you want to untrack classes and have a heterogeneous classroom, the best class size is around 15. When I taught public school, my largest class was a class of 30, and it ended up being one of my favorite classes that I've ever taught, shockingly, to my surprise. Would I want that in our schools? No. I think the smaller, between 15, 22 is ideal. I know we have to work with budget constraints, so I don't know how feasible that is.
Okay, this next question is for you. The ideal learning environment is 2 learners and 1 skilled to act as a guide or teacher, pursuing an area of common interest. Wherever it leads to an aha moment is so vital in building a lifelong love of learning. How can standardized education originating in so distinct and distant a place be relevant or meaningful to the learner?
I don't think it can. I think, teachers face the very real challenge right now of trying to prepare students for tests while also making things relevant. And, we can debate the advantages and disadvantages of different tests, and I think some are better than others. But when they begin to dictate curriculum, that's when I get nervous, because I think a good teacher is looking at the kids in his or her classroom each day and looking at what they bring, the questions that they bring to the table, their interests, their curiosities, their talents, their needs, and moving forward accordingly. And there's no standards for that.
I know I see things a little bit differently. I think back to my first years teaching social studies. I had 100% academic freedom. I could teach whatever I wanted to. I was big on U.S. history. That was my focus in college. But there was stuff I didn't really particularly like. The War of 1812. I'm joking a little bit, but not really. I think it's important that there are agreed upon standards. I think it's very important that there are agreed upon curriculum that all students get. The high school diploma should mean something, and it should mean that there's a set of skills, a set of content that all students have mastered, and their diploma proves that. Because without that, again, I think back to the dark days of my early days of teaching, when it was kind of a crapshoot. I think it was a good teacher, but I know there was stuff I didn't teach all kids, and I really think that that's a very important component, so that we have some really high standards in place for all kids to meet. Even our weakest, most challenged students, we need to hold them to high standards, and we do everything we possibly can to have them meet those standards, because I think every kid can meet those standards.
So on the 4th of July, what would the Boston Pops play without the War of 1812?
Touche.
As a parent of a child in the Maynard Public Schools and an educator, what has been your greatest concern about our schools?
I think just the general feeling. I mean, I'm really happy that there's been an investment in the physical plant in the schools, but in a time of tight resources, I just worry that the education gets trimmed back to a point where it's not what it could be. And that's tough. I mean, costs go up, salaries go up, special education costs go up dramatically, and we have to provide services. Transportation costs go up quite a bit. So I just worry that stuff gets tweaked and tweaked and tweaked until we're really left with just the core services, and things like art and music and other kind of cultural programs that are so vital wind up getting cut. So that's my concern, is that going forward, that the resources might not be available to the schools to support them in a way that's going to make them really excellent schools. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't pretend to know what the funding structure is going to be like, what the tax structure is going to be like. This does seem, I agree with Mary, it seems like the enrollment's going up. So we got to work really hard. I mean, that's one of the reasons I want to do this, is I want to protect the good things that are going on in our schools.
I just want to return for a minute to talking about standards. I would say I'm not opposed to all standards. I believe in high standards for students. What worries me is when those standards are being set by people who don't know our kids, who are doing that from far away. With regards to the concern that I have today, this is a small one, but the kindergarten this year has been piloting this program called Kindergarten Gold Strategies, and the report card for my son, I don't know, it looked like it was 20 pages long, and I didn't know how to read it. But when his kindergarten teacher was going over it, I could tell, just from teacher, as a teacher looking at another teacher, how frustrated she is with the process of filling out those report cards, because she said she has to document everything. So if my son, to say that he's good at making friends in one of the categories on social development, she said, I have to have a picture. I literally, I'm taking the iPad, taking a picture of him to put in the folder so I can support this checkbox that I've checked. So something like that, I just think, okay, they're trying it out. I know it's being piloted. I hope they won't continue with it, but it's just so much extra work for teachers, and does it really give us the information that we want? I would much rather hear a story about my son that tells me how he's doing. With regards to the budget, I did notice something in looking over some information. In 2012, our per pupil spending was $13,696. And if you compared that to 49 other K through 12 districts of similar size, the median per pupil spending for those was $11,883. And so I'm curious about that, because Maynard teacher pay isn't that much higher. So I'm curious why the per pupil spending is that much higher. So it's just something I'd like to investigate, not a worry about the schools, but about the system.
Thank you, Mary. Another question of you. Do you advocate programs like foreign exchange student programs that bring in money but also increase class size?
I think you have to weigh the benefits and the disadvantages when it comes to class size. I mean, I think exposing kids to other cultures and other worlds is incredibly valuable, especially because of my interest in cultural competency. So I think it's so exciting that the high school's doing that right now. As someone, my husband is a German citizen, so as someone who married somebody from another country, I didn't meet him on an exchange, but I just know how much we've benefited from learning about each other's culture. So I think you'd have to really calculate how big can we get. So it's bringing in revenue, but at what expense? If class sizes are getting up to 30, then no. I think you need to look at that. But could you bring in students and have their schedules be crafted around our classes that are smaller? I think there are creative ways to solve some of those problems.
Yeah, I definitely would advocate continuing that program. I think as the department in town with the biggest budget, we got to explore every revenue source we can. I think we owe it to the community. I think we owe it to the other departments to explore all of our revenue options. And I think it does enhance the education for everybody to have exchange students.
Okay. Dan, next question for you. What, in your opinion, are the best 3 things that our schools have here?
Football, basketball, and softball, as I should say, put a softball at the top of the list. I really like that it's a small system. My 3 older ones went through the Worcester Public Schools, and that's a very big system. There's definitely a close-knit feeling to it. I like that a lot of the teachers live here in town. I think that really means a lot. My stepdaughter's in the Spanish immersion program. I think that's a great program. I talked to a lot of my friends about it who are very, very impressed with what we have. And I like the geographic layout of the schools being on one parcel of land. I think that's creates a lot of efficiency, especially around transportation, to make sure that we're doing it efficiently.
First, I'd say size. I think that there are so many humongous high schools. To have a high school that is around 400 students just seems like such an asset. And because of its small size, I think in our schools that students end up getting to try more than one thing because they're manning not only the football team, the basketball team, they're also in the band. And in some school systems that couldn't happen because you'd be, you find your niche and you stay there. But I feel like our kids get exposed to a number of different interests. And then the third, so far I've been really impressed with the teachers that I've seen at Green Meadow. Granted, I've had limited exposure at this point, but I've just been so pleased at how well they seem to know my son and how willing they are to work with us on anything, any questions or any problems that we might have.
Okay, Mary, next question. How important is parent participation in education?
Huge. As a teacher, though, sometimes you'd rather they just stayed out of it. But in general, I think schools have been expected for such a long time to be the cure-all for all the social ills that we face, and I just think that's unfair. And experimental schools that have tried to make real reforms have tried to involve parents, and I think they're much more successful when they do. So far I feel like Green Meadow really does involve the parents, and I was so impressed with the open house and Tiger Trot going on this weekend. There are just all these different ways of getting parents involved. So I think the more parents can stay just informed about what's going on and be brought in as volunteers into the classroom, I think the better, even though it might drive teachers crazy sometimes.
Yeah, it sure does. No, parental involvement's very, very important, and I think research bears that out, that when there's a lack of parent involvement, I think it's really difficult for students to achieve at high levels. Having said that, I think there's kind of a curve that during the younger years, parent involvement's high, and it's encouraged, and it makes sense, but as the kids get into their teenage years, it goes down, and you're not wanted anymore, and you're dumb, and leave me alone. And I think that's appropriate in some ways too, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be connected to the school. I mean, I think that's one of the things is your kids are kind of pushing you away as they become adolescents, but you still need to be connected to the school. And I'm going to come back to the communication, the transparency issue. You know, there should be many ways for parents to stay involved to know what their kids are doing in school as they're teenagers. I mean, kids have to learn independence, no doubt, but there still should be ways for parents to be involved, especially knowing about their progress, their academic progress, their social-emotional progress, their participation in different things. So we should really encourage that and foster it.
Okay, next question for you, Dan.
You guys are asking way too many questions.
How does one maintain the separation of state and religion in education? And as a follow-up, does the teaching of evolution interfere with that concept?
Can we talk about Spanish immersion? I mean, come on. Well, I think it's important that it's not that there should be a complete lack of discussion of religion. There certainly should be no advocacy for any religion. I mean, I think it's part of a well-rounded education that kids learn about religion and different religions and different ways to practice religion, and some of the problems that have been caused by religion over the years. I don't think, you know, again, a history teacher, I think religion becomes a recurring theme in times of conflict, and I mean, this country was founded because of religious problems. So I don't think it means that we need to completely devoid the schools of any reference to any religion, but I just don't think we should be advocating any practice of religion. That said, I think kids have the right to talk about things. I think kids have the right to express or not express, and we shouldn't be trying to squelch that. I know it's a sensitive topic, but I have no problem whatsoever in saying that evolution has no place in the curriculum other than as a historical discussion of the ways that people understand the world around them.
I think if we don't teach evolution, regardless of the student, we're doing the student a disservice. So there are ways to teach it while still respecting the student's religious background. A science teacher at my school was just talking about a family who's very, very Christian and disapproves of the teaching of evolution. She had a conversation with the parent, and she just had to work really hard to, anytime she referred to evolution, to say the theory of evolution. But there are ways to have conversations about that difference. I mean, I think, again, going back to cultural competency, you have to learn about those people who disagree with you and how to talk to them and how to engage in intelligent conversations with them. And so I don't see the one as wiping out the other.
Okay, Mary, to you. How important is it to you that sports is a means in education?
Is it as a means in education? Yes. I'm not sure if I understand exactly what the person's looking for, but
how important to you is sports as a means of effective education?
A means of okay. I mean, I think kids can learn so much through sports. I think you can learn how to be a team player, how to work with people again who disagree with you. Just for as a mom of two boys, I see how important it is to their mental health and mine for them to be able to run around on a regular basis. You know, sometimes some of the best teaching kids receive is from coaches too, who really work on character building and team building. So I think it's important. One thing that does worry me a little bit, and this isn't just in Maynard, it's just the American educational system is so built around sports. So for example, we know that the teenage brain doesn't start to produce melatonin until after around 11 p.m. And so a lot of school districts have toyed with wanting to delay the start of school in the morning. And the answer that always happens, you would have to do it with all the other schools that you play sports against, so you could move the sports schedule to a different time. So that kind of thing is unfortunate. I don't think I want sports to be a part of my kids' experience in school, and at the same time, I push back a little bit when I feel like really important decisions are being dictated by sports.
I think sports definitely has a role for a lot of kids in schools. Some kids who don't excel in the classroom oftentimes excel in sports. But I think the same is true for the arts, whether it's performing in a play, which I did in high school. I love that. Playing an instrument, writing poetry, being involved in community service. I mean, I think that's one of the great things of the American public school system is there are so many different ways for students to express themselves, and athletics is one of them. But I totally agree that it's wrong to overemphasize sports and its role in education. But again, I've seen some great lessons learned in defeat as well as victory, great coaches that I've had. I try to be a good softball coach. But I think it has a role, but again, no more important than any of the arts, no more important than any other ways kids participate in extracurricular activities. We should try to encourage, and I'd love to have a strong sports program, but again, not at the expense of anything else that we're doing in the schools.
Okay, so this will probably be the last question, and we'll start with you again. Given the current mandates for which the school committee has no control, what initiatives will you be proposing in your tenure to improve our ability to educate our students?
I don't see myself as proposing anything, at least certainly not at the outset. I mean, I think the superintendent is the one who's responsible for developing the district priorities, working with the teachers and the building principals to develop the priorities. I want to support the priorities. I'll certainly give my 2 cents from time to time, but I don't think my role as school committee member is to propose the direction, to set it. We hire the superintendent, we evaluate the superintendent as a school committee member, and that's one of the important jobs. But to propose certain programs, I don't think that's my place. But again, I certainly want to do research and advocate the choices that we have in front of us, help prioritize and make really good decisions for the long-term health of the school. But I don't think that's going to be me making suggestions.
I would agree that I don't know that I'd go in right away wanting to propose something because I feel I have a lot to learn going in. I mean, as much as I've tried to educate myself about the problems the schools are facing, I think in the beginning I'll be doing a lot of listening. And I certainly don't want to impose my ideas on the committee. At the same time, there are questions. Again, like I said before, I think my role would be just to ask some questions. So I do wonder, the last school committee meeting I attended, they were talking about bus fees for next year. And I'm always curious about the buses because I think the fact that we believe in providing equal access to education for everyone, and yet, there are some families who haven't been able to get seats for their kids on the bus. I would just want to know more about that. I would want to ask more questions about that. Why, what are the limitations when it comes to finances in our buses? I've talked about this in statements that I think the Beacon Villager printed, but, in this day and age with a cell phone, you can pick it up and you can have access to any content. And I think that really has to change our curriculum within the schools and what we teach. Because if content is free, if information is free, it really frees our hands in a lot of ways to work on some more important stuff, in my mind. It's leveling the playing field with regards to access to information. And so skills become super important. Again, communicating across differences, being able to attack a problem from a number of different disciplines, that interdisciplinary approach. So those are definitely questions I'll be asking and wanting to find out more. What are we doing right now already? Because I'm sure we are doing some great things, and I'm sure we're doing some innovative programs.
Okay, that closes out our question and answer period. So we'll now go to the closing statements. So take off your school committee hats for a moment and put on your sales hats and sell the audience on why they should elect you.
Okay, yeah, I'm not a very good salesman. As I've said, I think one of my strengths is as a listener and an asker of questions, and I care so much about education. It's been my sort of life calling in a lot of ways, to do what I can to educate the kids that I teach in my classroom, but also just to try to bring better education to everyone. And I'd love the chance to represent you all and to work to better the schools for those of you, for your children, for those of you who do have kids. I promise to always listen and invite you to the table, to come to the conversation, to come to the school committee meetings, and hope that we'll be leaving the schools in a better place than they are now. Thanks.
Vote for Dan. No, I mean, we've talked a lot up here about what we believe in, and It's really up to you now to make a decision about who you want to have represent you. I don't think there's a bad choice. I don't know if that's not humble of me to say that, but clearly Mary is qualified, she's passionate, she's a good listener, she would be a great addition to the school committee. I know she'll work hard, I'll work hard. It's a choice for you to make. I mean, I know who I'm voting for, but I really do feel like the Maynard Public Schools will be a winner either way. I'm delighted to do it. I'm going to continue to campaign. I've been kind of going door to door and just saying hi to people and asking for their vote. It's a great way to really find out what's on the mind of people in the community. People really love this town and they love the schools. They want it to be better. There's no question. They want their money to be spent wisely. There's no question about that. But that's what I'm going to try to do, and I'd be happy to have your vote. I'd be happy to hear you via email or Twitter or Facebook. But seriously, thanks very much for coming out. It's really it makes me feel a lot better knowing that people are concerned about the schools and their community, and the turnout there is representative of that. So thank you very much, and I hope you all have a great night.
So that ends our evening. I'd like to thank particularly the 6 candidates here. I wish them all very good luck. And again, as I had said in the beginning, the town, and myself, and all of the current holders of office appreciate the interest that this audience has shown and the candidates have shown in the town. And so thank you for coming. Have a good night.